Hey everybody, it's Tommy Canale and welcome back to Before the Lights podcast, the show that tells you how they made their mark. He's a Mexican immigrant, a former U.S. soldier, combat medic, a retired undercover law enforcement officer, the author of Breaking Badly, a post-traumatic success story. He served as a member of the Arizona State Gang Task Force, became an actor, and an entrepreneur. He's been featured in films and TV shows such as Breaking Bad and Gang Related. He played the lead in numerous TV commercials. He's appeared on billboards and his face on the side of buses for a national advertiser. He's a keynote speaker on leadership in business, police undercover work, post-traumatic stress, and life post-retirement for law enforcement officers. Let's welcome into the show, Lou Pimber. Lou, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tom. I appreciate the introduction, man. You know what I'm going to do? Everywhere I go, I'm going to record that, and I'm going to have them play it everywhere I go, man. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
I love that. Hey, and thank you for your service. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Let's start here. We're going to go way back into when you were a child. You were adopted and raised by a loving mother and a father who was an alcoholic, and you lived in a garage. Tell me about this garage. Was it like a renovated garage, or did you just live in like a concrete floor?
You know, let me just clarify something. My mother didn't adopt me. She was my mother, my natural mother. It was my father who adopted me. Yes, but it was. So here's the thing: when I was a kid, I didn't know it was a garage, right? Because they built it. They kind of enclosed it with a door. They took the garage door out, put a door, right? But here's what I always wondered: it was two things. One was, why is it that when I have to use the bathroom, I have to walk through the kitchen of someone else's house to go use the bathroom, right? And I was a kid, man, and I was like, this is so strange. And then the other was it was so damn hot, man. It was so hot, you know. And then later on, I found out, well, it was actually a garage. It was a garage, and they just kind of enclosed. They let us rent space there, and so later on, I got even with that building. So yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna come full circle with that a little bit later on in the podcast. Here's something I found very interesting. And folks, I'm going to put a link in the podcast to his book, Breaking Badly, a post-traumatic success story. If you don't get it for yourself, if you don't get it for somebody who needs it or get multiple copies, you're missing the boat. This book is really good. And here's what I first highlighted when I'm reading your book. How does Lou Pimber get away with smoking and watching Scooby Doo at the same damn time?
Yeah. You know, sometimes we become a product of our environment, right? So my father smoked, my uncle smoked, and they, you know, in the 70s, people smoked everywhere. They smoked in the car, they smoked in the house. It was horrible, right? So I think what happens is you're around it so much, you pick up the habit, you get that nicotine fit, right? And of course, I didn't know that when I was a kid, but I would come home and I was basically mirroring the behavior that I would see. My dad would come home or my uncle come visit, and they sit down, light a cigarette, and watch television. So I all of a sudden I'm in school and I'm thinking about smoking, right? I'm thinking about smoking in school, and I remember little kids on the way to school had a little cigarette pack stashed away in the ditch, and they smoked one before school. And I'm like, that's what my dad does. So I would get home and I'd open up his packet. And back in those days, the cool guys would open up, they flip one cigarette over. I'm not sure what the meaning behind that was, but I made sure not to touch that one. And so I'd smoke, and my little sister would go in the back and play Barbies or whatever she was doing. And it's a latchkey lifestyle, you know, and it was the 80s, and I'd sit down and watch I Dream of Jeannie and a little bit of Scooby Doo, and I finished a cigarette. Yeah, that was, and no one ever found out. I almost got caught once or twice by my sister, but I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, you know? So yeah, I quit. I did quit. Thank God. I did quit. I saw, it was when commercials started coming out, you know, of you know, throat cancer, that sort of thing. So it scared the heck out of me, and I stopped it. Yeah.
You mentioned you were a product of your own environment, but by age 11, you had seen someone stabbed, drug addicts, and women beaten by pimps. Did you think this was normal, or did you know it was right from wrong?
I knew it was wrong because my mother would tell me, you know, she would just, and then, you know, even as a kid, you know, right from wrong, right? And so, but it does take good parenting to kind of keep you in check, right? To me, my mother was a great moral compass for me. And it was whatever was in hand, usually a chancla. She checked me with that, but I would see that I grew up in an area that was pretty bad. It was, you get what you can. And there was hookers and there was pimps and there was stabbings and there was fights right outside my front door. and later on, I found out the house away from us and a little bit to the right was this older gentleman who used to live there, had a nice little Cadillac. As it turns out, he was a neighborhood pimp, And yeah, when you're a kid and you're walking that night and you step over a guy who just got stabbed, and your dad's carrying you on your shoulder. Actually, he was walking me by my hand, and he says, "Just walk around him," and this guy just got stabbed.
Wow.
And you're a child, it's like, what's going on here? It leaves an impression on you, and you see that on a regular basis. But again, fortunately, my mother always, both my mom and dad had heavy hands, right? They took care of us that way. My dad never failed to pull out the old belt, and he had a talk with me first, and I'd watch him very methodically. He'd take it off, and take off his little buckled knife that was in there and a little sheath, put that down, loop that belt over, and took care of business. My mother, on the other hand, was a bit more ruthless, but I love him for that because believe me, it checked me. I think more people need to be spanked nowadays, man.
Hey, I am with you 100%. I grew up in the same environment. I agree with you 100%. Lou, tell me the moment as a child when you knew you wanted to be a police officer.
I was a kid and I was in a neighborhood walking at night. In the 70s and late 70s, it was those days where you'd be out on the street, man, until the lights came on. You're like, oh, it's time to go home, right? Or you hear a whistle, or you hear my mom or somebody yelling, and we're blocks away. This particular night, we're probably too many blocks away. Okay, and we were out running around. This little kid was lost, terrified out of his mind. I remember as kids, we just all gathered around him and just watched him cry. And somebody waved down a cop. He came over. I remember this guy, Hispanic guy, looked like he was in good shape and a nice clean cut haircut, showed up, man. I got you, kid. As it turns out, the kid wasn't very far from his house, And I was like, wow, that's so cool. And everybody was happy. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be a part of that. So, and these guys were my heroes, man. Even though every now and then they'd arrest my dad for stuff, and for just, being my dad, and my mom would have to call 911 for him being foolish, but I love these guys. I remember the smell of their leather belts, when they'd show up, and I would just watch their movements, as they moved. You can feel the leather moving, you know what I mean? It's just like,
Yep.
These dudes, yeah.
What pushed you then to serve in the U.S. Army and be a combat medic?
So I served as a combat medic mainly because, my uncle has served back in, I think it was the 50s or 60s. And he says, you're not a man until you serve your country, that sort of thing. And he's a really rough and tough kind of guy. And I admired him, He was a both good and bad example to me. And there was an opportunity for me to be able to become a soldier. And I actually, failed the medical exam first, right? So I failed the medical exam, and I go back to my recruiter. I failed the medical exam because I had this massive cyst inside my chest, and freaked me out. And they said, you're going to need surgery for that. So my recruiter, being smart like recruiters are, I says, hey, listen, if I can get you in the Army National Guard first, you still going to get to go to training. We can keep you on orders, and then you can go, be a full-time soldier. So I said, yes. So I didn't know what I was signing into. But nonetheless, I went to Fort Bliss, became a soldier. Eventually, after the surgery, was probably underweight, but I managed to get by and did okay, and became a medic, combat medic. Later on, I had a chance to serve on full-time orders, on active orders, and stayed on active orders until I started in law enforcement. I was an MP at that time, military police, because I was bilingual and one of those guys that asked a lot of questions, like I want to learn. I don't really have any mentorship. I'm here to ask questions, and I'd ask, and I'd find the people who were making it happen or at least close to the fire, and I'd go get close to them, and kind of like Les Brown. He kept bringing coffee to the main DJ, right? I was that guy. I was like, sir, can I help you with something else?
Right.
Sure. And I'd listen in. Hey, there's an opportunity to change your MOS to military police. I'm in. Hey, you speak Spanish? Yes, I do. There's these drug ops that are happening. You can be part of that. You can stay on those missions for 3 or 4 years. I'm like, sign me up, And so that's what I did. And getting a lot of training, a lot of specialized SWAT training, counter drug training, Army CID training, investigative training. And I just was lucky that way, I was fortunate,
You eventually get into the Arizona State Gang Task Force at a very young age. As I'm reading the book, I'm referring back to the movie Colors with Sean Penn and Robert Duvall.
Yes.
Were you more like Sean Penn at this point in time? We're just gung ho and ready to go. And then there's a guy older than you going, hey, it's just slow down, man. Slow down.
Yeah. There was a guy named Jack Machado who, I refer to him in the book. I didn't call him Jack, or I used some other similar name. He was Robert Duvall for me, and of course I wanted to go out there and take over the world. And, and I was this highly trained individual, but I had no experience, any real world experience, and now I'm selected because I had to be selected to go into this unit, and relatively new unit. Initially, they didn't want me there, but they say, listen, look at his credentials, So on paper, I looked amazing, right? But and as it turns out, I was just a little bit naive and immature, but full of willingness to go out there and get it done, And so they took me in. I did really well, but I had some learning to do, right? And Jack saved me from having to shoot a guy one time. It would have been a completely lawful, completely legit shoot. And I'm thankful I didn't shoot this poor guy. Pull out a big old knife, a machete on me. And Jack, from a different angle, called him by his old street name. The guy put the knife down. And he was like, wait a minute. He looked around like, this sounds like a familiar voice and a name I haven't been called in a long time. And I was ready because I was trained, right? That's what we do, right? Mm-hmm. I thank God that didn't happen. And so from there, I got recruited into their undercover squad. We worked undercover cases all over the state on gangs. A lot of money in it at that time, a lot of federal funding for it, state funding for it, So that was a whole other world for me. Familiar world in that I grew up there, but I never lived it, right? So it was some growing pains.
Yeah. You admitted in the book that you were lacking some communication skills at the time, but did being undercover, Lou, force you to grow up?
It did, because I got to work with these two dudes, a guy named Freddie Banks and a guy named Jay. Incredible guys. I really admire them. They didn't know I admired them, because I wasn't about to tell them that because they gave me so much crap, but I did. I respected them. But they had a way of, humbling me enough to where I had to eat some humble pie and then have to mature. And it forced me to kind of grow up a little bit, It did. It forced me to grow up a little bit. And I think had I admitted these shortcomings earlier in my life, or maybe at that point in my life, I would have been more successful probably, but I didn't, because you're young and you think you know everything. But I learned a lot. I did grow up a lot in that undercover environment. Yeah.
The people that are longtime listeners of my show have heard me talk to several different guests about street theater, but people that may be new to my podcast and not know what it is, can you just give us a quick example of what street theater is?
In the world of undercover work, street theater is when you're performing in the street. You're doing a drug deal, and there's supporting cast members. That's your surveillance ops. You know what I mean? And in some undercover ops, there's air ops. They're your aerial casts, right? Then you have cameramen who are shooting still photos of you from far away, right? And then there's a script we have to follow. We have to play a certain role, a certain character, right? There are some street theater that were impromptu. Some of them were impromptu, but because we were method actors, we pulled it off, right? Some of them were orchestrated. right? So where we know this guy is dirty and I'm trying to get him to come out a little bit, I would bring in another undercover guy and just chew his ass for lack of a better term, and chew him out for doing something dumb. So that would lure this other guy to say, hey, I can do it for you. Why not? Well, you can. Oh, then, bro, let's get down.
Right.
And that was street theater. We pulled it off,
Yeah.
And it was done in so many different ways. And some of that street theater involved actual video cameras, and so it's in the street, it's inside of a hotel room, it's in a car, it's all over the place. It's happening right before our very eyes sometimes, and most people don't see it.
Mm-hmm. One of the former guests I've had on the show wrote the foreword for your book, and Jay Dobbins.
Yes.
And he put in a great quote in there. Fear arrives when we anticipate pain or a threat, and bravery is a spontaneous disregard for safety, a reaction that pushes fear aside. So my question, Lou, is, were you addicted to the rush of undercover work and all that it comes with it?
I was, but much like an addict, I didn't know it, right?
Oh,
and
okay.
I enjoyed it. Like I was, okay, what's next? What's next? And you don't have time to be afraid, right? You don't have time to be afraid. Did I experience high anxiety, high, I guess, fear, right? At times, yes. But that's just part of it. That's what you sign up for. You sign up. Lieutenant Colonel Grossman said, we are sheepdogs. We're the protectors. We have fangs and have power and aggressive like a wolf, but we do not harm the sheep. We're protectors, right? And so that's what we're supposed to go do. We're the ones who face the bad guys. And I firmly believe that our job was to go out and get the bad guys. We're the ones who get called when no one else wants to deal with a bad guy in your community. We have to go do it. And we did it from an undercover posture. We did it that way. And we were the guys, my partner and I, later on when I was in the height of task force, our job was to go find those bad guys that the bad guys didn't want to mess with sometimes. Mm-hmm. And when I think of it now, at my age now, I'm thinking, that was pretty crazy, man. Like that was pretty nuts, And I had a conversation with Andrew on it, my partner, and I was like, that was pretty crazy. He goes, yeah. Yeah.
So how difficult is it then not to allow a criminal to dictate the pace of your investigation or direction?
Textbook. So I've been to training from different agencies. I've gone to their schools on drugs and stuff like that, undercover work, other 3-letter agency trainings and stuff like that. That's one of the main rules, is that you have to control the pace of the investigation. Because remember, the bad guys have an agenda. And oftentimes we believe the only agenda is just to get paid or to sell a product, their drug. But sometimes their agenda is to rip you off at any cost, right? So we have to do our best to control the pace of the investigation, control the pace of how they're moving, right? What they want to do, and second guess them a little bit, because sometimes they have bad intentions for you. One of the examples I give is in Scarface, when Tony walks into that hotel room in Miami, and he's like, what's going on? He knew something was wrong. He says, okay, let's do it again. Let's start over again. In the end, his partner ended up chained up to a shower, getting sawed off in half. And that scene, believe me, every time I did a drug deal in a hotel, in a house, that went through my mind. But it didn't stop me, because look, we're trained professionals. We train for that. We're prepared for that sort of stuff to the best of our ability. And that's how that works.
Drug dealers go to a high extent to hide or put drugs in all kinds of different things. What is the craziest thing that you saw them try to hide drugs into?
I arrived. So we were doing a surveillance operation that led out into the border near Mexico, right? And so it was from this example to the more traditional example, but this example to me was the most vile thing I could have ever thought of. Fortunately, I didn't get to see it with my eyes. I heard about it afterwards. We had just missed it. But these guys had smuggled a bunch of heroin, black tar heroin, inside of a dead baby's carcass. But the way they did it is they found a woman who was not paying attention, and they stole her kids right at the border and kill them like on the spot, right? They take them not too far away. They kill them, gut them, like animals, stuff them and move them across so they still look, quasi alive.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
That's what I mean. I mean, it's insanity and hard to even fathom the things that they go through to get drugs to where they want to go.
I mean, from that to putting, infamil containers, replace it with cocaine. What if you make a mistake? You know what I mean? To stash houses. It's a dirty business, man.
It is. Will complacency get you hurt in that line of work?
One of the things I learned by reading so many books throughout my lifetime and then being a soldier is complacency will get you killed, right? Sometimes we get too comfortable. Sometimes we think we know what it is. We don't pay attention to certain cues, certain indicators from people. And in the business of undercover work, our job is to be very good, obviously investigators, putting together cases, putting people behind bars, but to be very good observers of people's behavior. What he did and what he said, did they match? Right? Were his movements that they match what he said he was going to do? Little things like that in the real world, I guess, may not matter so much, but in the undercover world, it matters. It's a matter of life or death. Mm-hmm. A certain gesture from the person, a certain eye contact between bad guys to each other, a little too much of it can raise flags, And if you become too comfortable and you're not looking out for the danger cues, you can end up dead. I mean, I've heard of undercovers getting killed in a lot of different ways, and many times, to be honest with you, there was times with the undercover that was killed by a suspect who didn't even know he was an undercover cop. He killed him because the guy gave him an opportunity to kill him. Just too comfortable.
Man,
it's a fine edge. It's a fine edge we walk. We're always walking this edge and we're blindfolded. Think about that, because we don't know what's really happening in the mind of the bad guy.
Listeners, again, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to Breaking Badly, a post-traumatic success story. As I'm reading the book, Lou, and one of the parts that came up before I get into the whole thing of you're writing your book, there's a part where you get arrested, and I thought other undercovers get arrested as well, and you have to play the part of getting arrested. But then when does it go to you got to somehow break away from the bad guy if you're arrested and get free? I mean, you get taken to a different location. You guys get taken, put in prison. How does this work?
In my experience, it involved being taken into custody and being hauled away, right? Very rarely were you hauled away along with the suspect.
Okay.
Because there was really no need at that point because you have enough information already. There have been other cases where it's street theater, okay, and you're both being picked up to see what this suspect discloses to you, right? And so there's a lot of different things that I've seen happen. But in my experience, it's if an arrest goes down and you have to go down with it, you get taken into custody, you get handcuffed and you get shaken down a little bit and you go away. And then you end up back at your office, or you end up in another car somewhere else, several miles down the road.
You retired medically after sustaining career-ending injuries during an undercover assignment as one of your own turned against you. Listeners, here's what I'm not going to tell you. The whole story of what happened and what these injuries were. You know how you're going to find that out? You're going to get the book, and that's how you're going to find out the whole story. But you got PTSD to the point where you were thinking of suicidal ideations. You had anger. What breaks the cycle, Lou, for you to get out of this really deep PTSD that you were in?
It's interesting. Because of the injuries that I had sustained through that incident, when you suffer a brain injury, right? You're generally the last person to know, because as far as you're concerned, I'm fine. You know what I mean? But everybody else knew, I'm not fine. And I can laugh at it now because I've been able to process it for years. There was a time when I couldn't even discuss this because I was too emotionally tied to it, right? And I had to realize that I needed to get some help because I was being prescribed pain meds, muscle relaxers, mood relaxers, you name it, man. I had it all, right? And then, of course, I was chasing it down with a 12-pack, maybe once or twice a day. It was, and I had no one really to say to me, hey, dude, you need to stop that. This doesn't make any, this is not you. And in fact, because of the post-traumatic stress, when I met with counselors, they told me it was going to happen. I said, no, it's not. Counselor says, you're going to miss what you used to do. You're going to miss it. I said, I'm fine. I'm over it. I remember saying it, man. and how wrong was I? Because I found myself going places on my own when I shouldn't be driving, where I would normally meet a bad guy and just wait around and see what happens. And I was like, what am I doing? And I would leave. Then I would leave and I would get lost. I couldn't figure out direction, right? I was having trouble reading, right? Not because I couldn't read and comprehend, but because I was having trouble tracking the letters from left to right. And I went to my neurologist sent me to a therapist, and he did these tests, this battery of tests, and they figured out you got some problems. I said, okay. My neurologist called it. It wasn't an era when TBI wasn't a household name.
Okay.
Traumatic injury wasn't really a household name. The troops coming home from the war, and they were starting to develop it, and it wasn't a household name yet. So my doctor called it, oh, you got, like when a hockey player gets hit really hard by a puck in the face? It's like that. I'm like, okay. And so is it going to go away? He goes, well, it could go away tomorrow. It could never go away. I'm like, dude, you're not being very helpful to me right now, man. It's like a post-concussive syndrome you're suffering from. I said, all right. So now I had a name to it, and I did a lot of physical therapy, a lot of emotional therapy, a lot of counseling, a lot of anger issues. I wanted revenge, man. I plotted this revenge, and I write about that in my story as well. But once I reached a level of forgiveness, once I reached a level of knowing myself better, I read a lot of books. I read a lot of business books, and a lot of business books as part of my physical therapy. I learned to forgive. I learned that there's other things in life, and she was right. I was going to miss it, and I missed it. and the nightmares are horrible. They're horrible nightmares. And when I talk to cops around the country, I tell them, and even soldiers, I said, listen, we suffer from post-traumatic stress. We got to call it post-traumatic success, man. But we suffer from it not because we are weak. It's because we're noble men. We're good men. We're good women. And we're not predisposed to that type of thing. We didn't grow up in that environment. It isn't in us. We're good-natured people. And when we're exposed to that type of lifestyle for so many years, in my case, it came to a sudden stop. I never had time to process it out of my brain. It just came to a stop. I was no longer feeding it. And in the nightmares from men holding me down, I couldn't see their faces, to soldiers or men dressed like soldiers coming after me and chasing me, breaking into my home, to drug deals gone bad, to all sorts of ugly things. One of the worst nightmares I've ever had was I'm watching a guy run across the roof of a house. Real case. This actually happened. But in real life, the guy just jumps and gets away and gets caught later on. In my nightmare, this guy's running. I get to the side of the house, and I see him jump, and as he splats, as I hear the splat, it's my son. Yeah. It's horrible.
What got you past it?
Talking about it a lot. Now when I have nightmares, my wife used to get mad at me, right? She goes, what are you doing? So I just laugh it off, man. Oh my God, that's crazy, man. I can't believe that. I think of it no longer from an emotional standpoint. It's more from a logical point of view, right? And I understand it now because I read so much about it. I understand it, right? It's your body's way of coping with it, But here's the thing. I've listened to a lot of people. I've read a lot of books, and I met so many people like Jordan Peterson. I had conversations with him, a lot of people. And one of the things he said was, he even said this on the Jocko podcast. He said, so long as you are clear in your heart and mind that what you did, you're clear between right and wrong. As long as you're clear on those, what is right and what is wrong, if you're clear on it, you're going to be okay. It's when you're not clear and it's fuzzy that you get twisted, right? So as long as I process it that way, I figure I can be okay, you know? And you have to find things to live for, man. I have 2 incredible kids. My son's a lieutenant, Army lieutenant, MP, officer, doing it much better than dad could ever have. I have a daughter who's in the medical field in the Air Force, and hope to God she becomes a nurse practitioner or a PA, you know what I mean? So it's because of those reasons.
You know, there was another thing that you had in the book that jumped at me as well. ScienceDaily.com. Law enforcement regularly faces 3 traumatic experiences for every 6 months of service.
Yeah.
And we have people that have been on this job for 20, 30 years. And when you start looking at and adding numbers up, these people have seen so many traumatic experiences. Either they become numb to it or they've gotten to the point where they're never going to be able to process it all.
And both of them are bad.
Yes.
You become numb to it. That means you're just putting a Band-Aid over it and you're stopping the bleeding. You have to talk about it. But if talk about it, people are qualified to listen to it, right? And if you become totally, heart-stricken by it, you become broken up by it, you got to talk about it, right? Because yes, for example, the troops, they go to combat, they're there for a period of time, they come back home in a normal, safe environment, right? Us, we're policing people who actually have civil rights, and we're dealing with people that they're our neighbors, they're our fellow citizens, and they turn on you, right? And you have to live in that environment. There's so many triggers that happen that remind you of, oh my God, I almost got shot there. Oh, I almost shot a guy there. Oh, I almost got stabbed in that house in a drug deal. Or they kept that house at gunpoint once. We when we're constantly dealing with these what if scenarios, it makes it hard on you. It makes it very, very difficult. It's challenging.
After you're done and retired, when did the opportunity present itself to become an entrepreneur?
So what happened is I'm still going through my rehab. It took me about 4 years to rehab, just so you know, okay? So I'm going through this rehabilitation, dealing with the vertigo, dealing with the chronic pain, all these issues I was going through with, right? And so I'm meeting some friends. I'm at their house. Lady says, hey, weren't you like a soldier or a cop? I said, yeah, I was actually both. She goes, oh, well, there's a guy here from Mexico filming movies. And so I was at, and she goes, don't you speak Spanish? I says, yeah. So I got connected in the movies first, right? In the process, at the same time, I got into developing real estate. Robert Kiyosaki changed my life, and I got to meet him. Crazy how that happens. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. When you set your sights, you set your goals, you align yourself with the right people, all of a sudden, they're right there in front of you. I'm at Patrick Bet-David's house, and I'm there with Robert Kiyosaki.
Wow.
And so I got into movies. And so, but your question was entrepreneurship. After building homes, I had to go through a very nasty divorce and all kinds of stuff happened, but I got involved in the insurance business, man. I realized I can actually still serve and protect my community through financial literacy, financial education, protecting 401ks. These cops work so hard for their 457 plans, and they go buy a boat when they retire. It's like, I want to show you where you can park that so you can have money for the rest of your life along with your pension,
Yeah.
Set up college funds for kids. Now I'm in a position, I've been mentored by guys like Patrick Bet-David, a lot of different people, and I'm able to mentor other people to become business owners as well. You see, I've learned to solve problems, and that's what leadership is, man. I learned to solve problems all day long, putting out problems. I've read numerous books. And so entrepreneurship for me is giving me a chance to serve others while at the same time serving myself, but I'm serving myself and giving all of myself to people that I mentor.
Before we get into acting, I said we were going to come full circle. What'd you do with that garage you used to live in?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So when I was getting into this entrepreneurship world, I bought these little pieces of land, right, in the neighborhood that I grew up in when I was a kid. Okay, the same little lots of land that were full of grass. I used to play Cowboys and Indians in, right? I bought a couple vacant ones. Then all of a sudden, I see the place where I lived in for some time. I contacted the owner. I said, "You want to sell it?" He says, "Yeah." I'll call my buddy. Hey, he wanted to build some homes, some duplexes. I said, "That one's for sale." So I went, I demoed the heck out of that building. I demoed it, hired a crew. Let's demo it. They said, "Well, we need to make sure there's no asbestos." I don't care what's in that place. Just demo the thing. So they went through the whole process. They demoed it. And I built brand new houses there so that the next people who live there, don't have to live in a garage. They'd improved it since then, but yeah.
Love that. And then when you get into acting, you've been in stuff such as Breaking Bad. But before then, I'll put a link to this as well, listeners. You did your own series called Duress.
Yes. Yeah.
It's very realistic. And along with, you want to talk about as realistic as it gets, I'll put a link to this one as well. When you played the lead character in Jay Dobbins' Big Red Friday, between those two, you can't get it more realistic than Duress and Big Red Friday.
Right. Yeah, I tell you, Jay is such a talented guy, man. Super talented. I've had the pleasure of getting to know him over my many years, and super talented guy. He gave me a shot to be on that, and he wrote it, and I was like, "Jay, did you write that with me in mind, dude?" Because I was kind of a knucklehead like that when I was young. He goes, "No, just the way it worked out." I said, "Okay, buddy." And so before Big Red Friday, I had shot Duress. Right, I was messed up at the time. I was on a lot of pills, a lot of beer. I was kind of recovering. But what happened is, God puts people in your life sometimes, man. And I reference God because that's what I believe in, right? And the people in your life to help direct you, right? He sends that lifesaver, and then sometimes we don't take it, right? So I took it. Met a guy who's a writer. He says, "Man, I bet you have a lot of stories." I'm like, "Yeah." Again, I'm all messed up at this time, right? I go, "Yeah, if only you knew," right? So I shared a couple with him. He goes, "Man, what do we make a movie out of it?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's make a movie out of it." But the budgeting gets involved, right? I'm like, to make it really good, we need a lot of money. He goes, "How about we make a short film?" I go, "What is that?" He says, I'm like, "Oh, shoot, let's do that." And I had already done some acting, right? And he says, and I had connected up with a guy named Noel G, pretty well-known actor out of LA, and some other people, and he was going to play the part that I played. He ended up not being available, and so I ended up playing the part that I had made for him, and I hired two other actors, professional actors from LA, one to play like me in real life. His name was Chino in the film, and another guy to play Andrew. And but it's based on two real life stories that happened and how an undercover agent handles business, right? And my son's in it. He's got a quick little cameo in it, and my friend Vince Tracy was there to help as well, and so Duress did very well in film festivals. I was very proud of it. They should watch it. I'm not gonna give it away, but it's hard to watch yourself on the big screen and have people critique you because I put it in a film festival and it played, and as you know, it ended and it got really quiet. And I'm like, they hated it, right? And all of a sudden, some woman screams, and I think she liked it, and people started clapping, and I was like, okay. And it won, man. I was so proud of myself and the crew, that I put it together. And my intention, just so you know, man, I'm telling you, when you set your sights right, stuff can happen, dude. I was like, this little video, this series, if I make this a series, it's going to play after that show I heard called Breaking Bad. I'm a little jealous, right? I'm like, it's going to be on that show right there. It'll be play afterward, and lo and behold, man, a couple years later, I get because of duress, an agent saw it. Agent says, we like to pick you up as talent. I'm like, you do? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, they do. So I was like, all right. So that's how I got an agent. That agent eventually connected me up with the casting out of duress, out of Breaking Bad. And they cast me. I almost didn't show up because I was too afraid. I heard all these named actors were being turned down. But I was like, what am I afraid of? I prepared. I met with a coach. I got this. And you get there and you do your very best. And then it's like, you come to find out, well, Los Angeles casting want this other guy. New Mexico casting prefers you. Well, LA's got more clout, right? So LA casting put the other guy in the role that I went for, but they ended up casting me as his buddy. I'm like, dude, I'm thankful for either way, I said, But it allowed me, unbeknownst to me, man, to fulfill other goals that I had set for myself as a kid, little dreams. When I was a kid, I said, I want to be a stuntman, I'm like, what the heck? I don't know. Eric Estrada does his own stunts from what I heard, right? And all of a sudden, I'm on the set of Breaking Bad, and I'm hanging off the side of a truck. Some scenes that didn't come out in the final cuts, a lot of them, by the way. And I'm up there, and I'm like, dude, this is a stunt by industry standards. And all of a sudden, I went to when I was in the 6th grade. I'm like, I said I was going to do it, and I did it. If you don't write your goals down, if you don't make a habit of just challenging yourself and putting them down, they're not going to happen. You can't keep your goals a secret.
Amen. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can't keep your goals a secret. You can drive by the cemetery and find people who never fulfilling their goals. They kept that secret too long, and time ran out.
Yep. What leads to success in your mind?
What leads to success, or what leads people to success?
Yes.
In my opinion, I have learned that it's really based on association, right? Not about who you know. It's your association. I can know a very successful person, doesn't mean I want to be successful. If I learn from them, right, and I'm around their conversation, I'm listening to their goals and dreams, because they're not keeping it a secret. Eventually, it's going to rub off on me. Association. Number 2 is the books you read, right? Look, there isn't a problem that hasn't been written about or solved some way, right? And number 3 is the places you hang out at, or the meetings you attend. Like, where do you spend your time at? You know what I mean? Are you spending all your time in a nightclub, in a bar, in your room playing video games? Or are you spending your time with other entrepreneurs that are at? Just eating, living, breathing,
Mm-hmm.
And really having faith, man. Entrepreneurship is all about faith.
Yes.
Entrepreneurs, we believe it before we see it.
Yes, we do.
Everybody else has to see it before they believe it. I'm like, brother, this ain't for you, man.
The title of your book is Breaking Badly, but what does breaking badly mean to you?
I came up with that. I didn't have a title for a while. My wife, Rhonda, she was like, you got to write this book. For years, she's been telling me. I didn't know how to write it, man. I couldn't share the story with people. I couldn't. So for those of you who read it, you'll understand why I couldn't share the story. And finally, I had to. And I realized I didn't have a name for it. She booked us on a cruise out way down like Honduras and place like that. And I'm in the cabin, and I come in the room, and I said, I have the name. She goes, what is it? I had all these names, right? I go, what is it? It's called Breaking Badly. And she got quiet for a second. I'm like, you hate it, huh? She goes, no, I think it's great. Because I was breaking badly. I was messed up. I was broken badly. I was in bad shape. You know what I'm saying? I was.
So was the reason for writing the book then for you or for others?
That's a great question, because when my editor read it, she says, I don't think I need to add anything to this other than make some changes and edits and stuff like that are normal. She goes, I think this is a way for you to let go of stuff. I said, yeah. But she says, the people who love this book the most are going to be women, she said. I said, really? I said, why? She goes, because it isn't a how-to book. It isn't. I said, you're right. It's not a hero book. Yes, there are some undercover stories in there, but it's more about a reinvention book. It's about a comeback. And I said, okay. And many of the reviews I've gone on Amazon have been from women, so I guess she's right.
Listening to everything we've talked about, I guess I know this answer, but I just want to ask it anyway. Did you ever feel like you lost your identity?
I went through a major identity crisis when I got out of law enforcement. When I talked to cops all over the country, I said, listen, you're gonna miss it. You're not gonna show who the heck, you're not gonna know who the heck you are. Because your whole life, I was that guy. I was no one really knew, but some people knew, like, wow, is he what you do what? I'm like, yeah, I'm that dude, bro. Like that. Yeah. Your ego says that, and once that's gone, you don't know who you are. Like, I felt like I was this warrior, this samurai like my master says, go be the gardener. You know what I mean? And I couldn't fight anymore. The doctor said my injuries were too dangerous for me to be back out there doing it. And so I did lose my identity. I did lose myself. I didn't know who I was, and I had to refine myself. And the great thing about reinvention, the great thing about life is that it's very forgiving. As long as you're willing to admit that you need some help, that you want to reinvent, and you want to associate with good people, and be honest with yourself about it, right? Be honest with yourself about it, and be willing to start back at zero. Empty that cup, let someone else pour it with some stuff, knowledge, information, know-how. I had to do that. Acting taught me a lot too. It forced me to have to hang out with people that I otherwise probably wouldn't be hanging out with. I've been in Fox Studios in LA, other places where people that I probably wouldn't be hanging out with because their lifestyle is a little bit different than mine, right? But I was forced to have to say, you know what, cool, bro. That's how you want to be. That's all good, man. We have one thing in common. We want to make this project happen, right? And when I started regaining my identity, learning who I can be, it was great, man.
I want to end with this. I'd like you to explain to my listeners about Copline, because I think it's something that needs to get out there more.
For sure. So Copline, I have a YouTube channel, Lou Pimber Speaks. Did an interview with a gentleman on there, LA County Commander, and Chuck. And Copline is an organization where law enforcement officers, current and retired, can call just to process issues, man. One of the challenges cops have today is, if you're currently serving, who do you process issues with? If you process it with your commander, red flags go up. It's not right. Take away your gun. Possibly. You process it if you ask to speak with a counselor and you admit that you sometimes think of hurting yourself, well, they have to report that. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Or you talk about it with your wife, she may not be the best person to listen to. You know what I mean? You talk about it with your friend, he might be in the same situation, or worse, now both of you are going to jump. So Copline gives guys a chance to call this number, process issues with qualified listeners. They're all vetted. They're all retired cops who can help you process the problems. Sometimes when we share the problem and we hear the problem, we hear ourselves share the problem, believe it or not, many times we solve it. Or we hear how, hey, that's actually pretty damn serious. Or we hear how, it's not that serious, man. I'm so glad I let it out. Because if you don't let those things out, like in my case, that stuff sits in your head long enough, it goes to your heart.
You said you have a YouTube channel, Lou Pimber Speaks. Where else can listeners connect with you online?
They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on Instagram. I have a website, loupimber.com. My book trailer is on there. Links to my book is on there as well. And also have to thank my publisher, Cedric, for being an incredible guy. You know what I mean? Helping me so much, guiding me as well. And my wife for smacking me, make me write the damn book. And you can find me there, and you can find me on, man, look, if cops want to talk, shoot me an email. We'll talk, man. We'll talk on the phone if you want. You know what I'm saying? I speak to a lot of organizations as well, a lot of groups. I was just in Las Vegas speaking, so companies.
Listeners, go to the show notes. I'm going to put links to the website, to his YouTube channel, to where you can get your hands on the book, Breaking Badly, a Post-Traumatic Success Story. Lou, thanks for your time. Time is valuable to all of us. It's the greatest gift you can give someone. And I appreciate you coming on my show and talking about your book and your career.
Hey, I appreciate Tommy.
You are welcome. You are welcome. Listeners, before we go, don't forget, join the exclusive Before the Lights members group. Click the link in the show notes. It includes private video calls with former guests, a one-of-a-kind poker chip, extra content, and more. It's just a small way for you to support the show. That's going to do it for this episode of Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.